Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs is very pleased to co-organize this webinar on Roundtable 4, together with the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We thank the Secretariat of the United Nations Network on Migration for its support in organizing this event. My name is John Wilmoth. I am Director of the Population Division of UNDESA. The Population Division has a long tradition of supporting the General Assembly in its discussions of international migration. Indeed, the item International Migration and Development was added to the agenda of the Second Committee following the International Conference on Population and Development, held in Cairo in 1994, when calls were made to hold a UN conference on international migration. More than one decade later, in 2006, the GA held its first high-level dialogue on international migration and development. Almost a quarter century later, in December of 2018, the GA convened an international conference to adopt an intergovernmentally negotiated agreement on migration, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. And now, 28 years after the Cairo conference, we are preparing for the first International Migration Review Forum, for which the main purpose is to take stock of the implementation of this landmark agreement among UN member states. In our experience, technical seminars can be quite useful for member states and other stakeholders in preparing for high-level GA meetings. I hope that this webinar will provide a space for education, reflection, and brainstorming, and in doing so, will help all of us to prepare for the upcoming forum in May of this year. Today, we are very pleased to have 5 excellent panelists who will help us in this task. Professor Ellen Percy-Crayley of Colgate University will speak on Objective 1 on improving migration data. Ms. Mamouna Essayed, President of the Moroccan National Human Rights Council, will address Objective 3 on providing information to migrants. And Mr. Diego Morales from the Legal and Social Studies Center will introduce Objective 7 on reducing vulnerabilities. Mr. Richard Wilson from Stop Funding Hate will share his views on Objective 17 on eliminating discrimination. And Martin Seychelles, Deputy Director General of the International Partnerships Division of the European Commission, will reflect on Objective 23 on enhancing international cooperation. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to each of our panelists for agreeing to contribute to today's discussions. As indicated in the program, each panelist will have 4 minutes to address 2 questions. And those questions are, what is the current state of affairs concerning achievement of the objective that you were asked to review? And what are priorities for the further implementation of the Global Compact that can advance progress toward that same objective? After the introductions by the 5 panelists, there will be 50 minutes for interventions from the floor. Given that we have over 800 registered participants, I ask that such interventions be limited to no more than 2 minutes and preferably to no more than 1 minute, so that we can benefit from as many interventions as possible. Those who have requested to speak in advance will be given priority. Kindly ensure that your intervention responds directly to the issues raised by the panelists or in the draft background note for Roundtable 4. Following the interventions from the floor, the panelists will have 2 minutes each to respond.
John, yes. This is Bela from the Secretariat. The floor is now for OHCHR to make some introductory remarks, after which it will be passed back to you to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Bella. Nice to see you again, John. And dear colleagues, on behalf of the co-leads for this roundtable, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, I'd like to join John in welcoming all of the participants to this fourth and final webinar as a part of the UN Network's IMRF Dialogue Series. My name is Craig Mokhyber. I'm the Director of the UN Human Rights Office in New York, and it really is a pleasure to be with all of you today. Seeing that we have over 800 participants with us on the call is a sign both of the importance of the issues covered within this Roundtable 4 and of the positive momentum that we're carrying with us into the IMRF. As a reminder to everyone joining today, the aim of these virtual dialogues is to prepare us for the IMRF taking place in May, which will include 4 roundtables offering space to review the progress made in implementing all 23 GCM objectives, consistent with the Global Compact on Migration's vision and guiding principles. We hope to come away from today's dialogue with a number of concrete inputs that can help us to strengthen Roundtable 4, both by identifying key gaps, as well as examples of promising practices to better support GCM implementation. Now, before proceeding further, allow me to say a few words about the specific GCM objectives that we'll be discussing today. It should come as no surprise that while migration is an empowering and positive experience for many, failures of migration governance are leading to the routine violation of migrants' human rights across countries of origin, transit, and destination. Many of us choose to leave our countries of origin each year to take jobs, to be with family members, or to seek new opportunities and horizons. But an increasing number of migrants are compelled to leave their homes for a complex combination of reasons, including poverty, lack of access to their rights, and the adverse impacts of climate change. While migrants are not inherently vulnerable, they can become vulnerable to human rights violations due to the situations that they face in their country of origin, the situations they face in transit, at borders, and upon arrival, or because of their age, gender identity, race, disability, or health status. And migrants in an irregular situation are disproportionately subjected to discrimination, xenophobia, exploitation, and abuse, often living and working in the shadows and denied their basic human rights. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated inequalities in opportunities for safe and dignified migration even more, with migrants disproportionately impacted by restrictions on their freedom of movement, the lack of safe and regular pathways, the lack of access to COVID-19 vaccines, testing, and prevention, the threat of criminalization, pushbacks, and immigration detention, among many other human rights violations. These unjust realities demonstrate the importance of the commitments made in the Global Compact on Migration, in particular, the central GCM commitment to ensure the effective protection of all migrants, regardless of their status, and across all stages of the migration cycle. Today, we have the opportunity to discuss 5 GCM objectives that can help to uphold migrants' human rights and to expand the opportunities for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Objective 1 relates to the importance of quality disaggregated data for informing evidence-based policymaking and programming, and for fostering an informed debate on migration. When data collection safeguards migrants' rights to privacy and data protection, it can be an essential tool for actually delivering targeted interventions that meet the needs of migrants and their families and communities. Objective 3 focuses on the need for accurate, accessible, and transparent information at all stages of the migration process. We know there are gaps between the information needed and what is available, including on pathways for regular migration or migrants' rights. But when states take steps to tackle discriminatory laws, policies, and other barriers to accessing information, safety and predictability can be improved for all actors. Objective 7 highlights the central importance of preventing and addressing situations of vulnerability throughout the migration process. And it encourages member states to draw upon the UN's principles and guidelines on human rights, protection of migrants in vulnerable situations, led by OHCHR, including by providing for identification, assistance, and protection of migrants in situations of vulnerability, by ensuring that all migrants have access to basic services, by expanding the availability of regular pathways and reducing precariousness of status, and by establishing alternatives to immigration detention. Objective 17 recognizes that eliminating all forms of discrimination, promoting evidence-based public discourse, and confronting anti-migrant sentiment is a crucial part of a comprehensive approach to migration. Racism and toxic narratives harm both migrants and our societies. So to achieve a more humane and constructive public discourse on migration, we need to consistently condemn acts and expressions of racism, racial discrimination, violence, xenophobia, and related intolerance against all migrants. And we need to take measures to promote more inclusive, diverse, and welcoming societies. Finally, Objective 23 is a commitment to strengthen international cooperation and multilateralism in the field of migration, and in alignment with the Global Compact's 360-degree vision and guiding principles. There's no shortage of cooperation today between countries of origin, transit, and destination. As the Global Compact on Migration acknowledges, no country can address migration alone. But the lived reality of many migrants around the world makes clear that more cooperation is desperately needed, not in the building of walls and barbed wire fences or detention centers, but to protect migrants' human rights and to expand the opportunities for all migrants to move in safety and dignity. We are deeply committed to making these Global Compact commitments a reality. And on behalf of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN Network, and our co-lead for this roundtable dialogue for the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, I want to thank you for your commitment and for your participation today. And with that, it's my pleasure to give the floor back to our moderator, John Wilmeth from DESA. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Craig, and my apologies for any mix-up on the order there. But we will move back now to the back to the discussion with the panelists. We'll move into that discussion. I'll repeat again the two questions that all panelists are being asked to address. Number one, what is the current state of affairs concerning achievement of the objective that you were asked to review? And number two, what are priorities for the further implementation of the Global Compact that can advance progress towards that same objective? So the five panelists, I've already introduced them. So we will begin with Ellen Crayley. Ellen, we look forward to hearing your views concerning achievement of Objective 1 on data. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. It's an honor to have this opportunity to contribute to this important dialogue and to be present among such esteemed colleagues. I am to address progress and priorities concerning the collection and utilization of accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policy, the first objective of the GCM. In these introductory remarks, let me adopt a scalar perspective. First, at the international and global level, we have the benefit of the strong foundation of the work of the UN Secretariat, the work of both the Statistical Division and the Population Division in auditing the collection of data on migration, international migration, particularly in the area of national population censuses. Second, we have the work of the UN expert group on migration statistics that is addressing both operational definitions of international migration and temporary mobility, as well as primary and secondary topics of inquiry to promote common measurement, characterization, and analysis of international migration as a way of comparing patterns and trends across regions and among member states. Third, we have partnerships in international and regional government entities and scientific communities of migration and population scientists. These have emerged to promote collection and analysis of data as a basis for migration policy analysis, as well as understanding the causes and consequences of migration in relationship to sustainable development. The Second International Forum on Migration Statistics is illustrative of such a partnership, as is the work of the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population, IUSSP, in promoting and advancing a world migration survey. Fourth, initiatives at the regional scale represent highly innovative approaches to data collection from regions throughout the world. For example, within the leadership of the African Union, the Special Technical Group on Migration has engaged in the prospect of piloting a world migration survey. Of course, this piloting embraces the challenge of sampling design to yield reliable estimates of international migration at the national scale. The African Migration Observatory, excuse my nervousness, emerges as a model of regional cooperation. Fifth, in reflecting on progress at the regional and national scales, I am so fortunate to be participating in a forthcoming project for the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP, in analyzing and reviewing responses among member nations to the voluntary GCM survey to inform the Asia Pacific regional review of the implementation. Preliminary analysis of these surveys provides insight and really inspiration in progress being made at national levels concerning the implementation of Objective 1 concerning data collection and analysis. I am inspired to engage the audits being done by member states within Asia and the Pacific on the nature of data being collected on international migration, and also the appreciation of national administrative data systems as generative of statistics on specific groups of international migrants and movers. We should take inspiration from these member states. And I've also been very impressed with the engagement of a whole of government approach to the collection of data on international migrants, movers, as well as residents. Now, at each of these scales, there are opportunities, but also challenges to meeting the implementation of Objective 1. Critical challenges, but also opportunities as we set priorities. Among the priorities I would set for meeting Objective 1 derives from the values, the guiding principles of the GCM, particularly for international cooperation, sustainable development, and a whole of government approach. First, international cooperation concerning the conceptualization and measurement of migration and mobilities will foster internationally comparability in migration analysis, serving to document existing trends and patterns in movements with appropriate indicators to help identify emerging patterns and trends as well. We have to be forward thinking.
Excuse me, Ellen.
Second,
Ellen,
yes.
could you please conclude quickly? You're already a minute.
Already at 4 minutes. Okay, certainly. And then we should think about causes and consequences of migration in relationship to sustainable development. And finally, we need to think about a whole of government approach in order to really build capacity and communities of migration scholars, administrators, and statistical leaders within our countries, within our regions, and then ultimately at the international scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And for our next panelists, I will take the technique of, I will turn off my video when you start speaking, and I will turn my video back on at 4 minutes to let you know that the time is up, okay? And then I will come in a little bit later and cut you off if you continue speaking. Thank you so much, Ellen, for that excellent intervention. I will now, we will turn we will have a look at progress towards Objective 3. Mamuna, you now have the floor. Is Mamuna there?
Merci, Monsieur Wilmot. Tout d'abord, je tiens à vous remercier pour l'organisation.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you for allowing me to attend this important event. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today as the representative of the National Human Rights Council of the Kingdom of Morocco. As you know, the National Human Rights Council here has been in place since 1999, and we are also involved with the African network of human rights committees and commissions, and we're also involved with other international partners. I will try to focus here on the role that we play as an institution that aims to promote and defend human rights, and focus on objective 3. On the first sub-objective related to developing a website that collects all of the various legal instruments available, we have noticed that there are interesting initiatives that have been in place by various department services, which have clearly decided to share information on the available instruments. We have the website of the Foreign Affairs, the Justice Ministry websites, and the central government website. On the second sub-objective related to the bilateral negotiations and discussions between countries, Morocco has presented a report on behalf of King Mohammed VI to the African Observatory of Migrations, and this report has been presented last Sunday during the 36th session of Heads of State and Governments of the African Union. This report contains several interesting observations and recommendations that fit within Objective 3, among them, I would mention here the need to establish registration systems which are non-discriminatory. We also focus on the need to build capacity in the countries of origin by establishing consular services. The report also concludes by a call to migrants, and we believe that migrants should not be left out and should be considered as key actors of our development, and should be fully integrated and join in the establishment of the policies that concern them according to the Marrakesh Compact. As far as what we do within CNDH, we try to promote safe, orderly, and regular migration. We try to produce and share information with migrants. We think it's important when you cross a border to be correctly informed and to have all the information you may need. This is still something that needs to be improved. We have a problem, particularly related to the fact that some people speak French, other people speak Arabic here, and that in addition to the other languages that are spoken on the territory or on the African continent, including English, Portuguese, among others. We think that by promoting intergovernmental cooperation between the various agencies, we can establish a better and more coordinated approach, and that is how we can help migrants better. Finally, let me share some of the activities that we have been conducting in order to face the COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences. We have produced a series of awareness-raising video clips for information sharing purposes. We've also developed and published a multilingual video in French, English, and Spanish, as well as Wolof and Lingala, to inform migrants of important aspects that relate to them. Finally, the National Human Rights Council also wants to highlight the important role played by civil society organizations and human rights defense organizations here. They contribute a lot to collecting valid, useful, and relevant information across the migration pathways. And I think that with that sort of information, we should be able to fill the existing information deficit. Thank you.
Alors, merci, Madame, pour cette intervention très
Thank you very much, Madame, for this very informed intervention and for sticking to the 4 minutes time limit.
We will next have on Objective 7, Mr. Diego Morales, and after that, Mr. Richard Wilson on Objective 17, and then Mr. Martin Seychelles on Objective 23, in that order. And I wish to remind all participants that this meeting is being recorded. So now, Mr. Morales, over to you on Objective 7 on reducing vulnerabilities. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. We've been working in the negotiation of the GCM and also in the following up about Objective 7, reduce vulnerabilities in migration. This is one of the most important when defining migration policies and human rights. According to this objective, vulnerability is an inherent condition for people, but it's also a situation that can be given because of the circumstances they are traveling or the situation they face when they get in the different countries, when they migrate. In 7A, states were committed to analyze their policies and practices in order to guarantee that they don't create vulnerability for these people. In other points, as has been already mentioned, there's a commitment to create migration policies in order to solve all these problems with assistance, health, psychological help, gender policies, and labor policies. There's also an agreement to give access to irregular migrant to transparent procedures which are clear and effective for regularization and in order to have a migrant status. About this specific point, from our experience in Latin America, we see that wide criteria for regularization are very important to give access to these people to rights. These policies, unfortunately, in our region, live with other policies more oriented to criminalization. So from one side, we try to protect, but from the other side, we do the contrary. The same goes for reactions from these countries, especially from Venezuelan migration. COVID-19 worsened the situation with the closure of borders, which was a problem in Argentina, for instance. The closure of public offices because of the lockdown had a negative impact when renewing paperwork, and it generated delays, and some migrants didn't have papers or ID. There was also lockdown not only in borders, also in offices, and this limited access to specific procedures for protecting rights.
This was also true as regards the right to asylum that was suspended, even in some of our overland borders towards the north of Argentina, for example. And we can see that as regards the compliance with or not of the compact, this has got to do with the design for programs aimed at social protection of people within the context of the pandemic. Now, these programs were limited exclusively to migrants in regular situations, and they weren't extended to those whose status was of irregular situation legally. So migrants that were that had a regular status were only included if they met requirements, which were in fact years of residence. So we can see that these limitations and the limits on the borders and the migration controls, increased police controls, more military presence on the border, even if that predates the pandemic produced by COVID-19, military agents became actually a prime source for actually controlling the efforts to protect against COVID-19 on the border between Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Peru, etc., Bolivia. So we can see that we have to protect migrants, and these are state-led decisions, but they actually end up being contrary to the Global Compact's objectives, and that's why we actually ask for them to be follow-up in terms of the commitments contained within the Global Compact, so that we can see what the pathways are, so that we can deal with the return as well as the entrance of migrants in regular fashion. And we really do need to do this so as to be able to accompany objective number 7. So this guide also says that in terms of reducing vulnerabilities, these guides have to be very clear and transparent based on human rights and actually corresponding to the particular situation of each migrant. So the narrative is very similar to that of the Global Compact. We're talking about humanitarian conditions and trying to keep family units together. And we also see that there are economic figures that also need to be borne in mind. And this guide also talks about best practices adopted by states so as to reduce vulnerability at certain points in time. It also underlines the need for permanent and foreseeable and accessible in ways in which we can actually make sure that we can change the migration focus so that we can go over and above this clearly insufficient visa method practiced up until now. So we can't just continue to have harder measures, because we can see that this phenomenon of migration is always going to be overcoming any of the hurdles designed to keep it back. It's always, the migrants are still going to be coming, and that's why we have to work on objective number 7 to reduce vulnerabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diego. And we now turn to Richard, I believe. Yes, Richard, who will speak about objective 17. We look forward to hearing your insights on progress in this area. Richard.
Thank you very much. So objective 17 specifically talks about countering racism and xenophobia towards migrants and promoting a more evidence-based public discourse. And it lists a number of actions that stakeholders can take towards that goal of countering xenophobia. I'm going to focus on one really crucial area highlighted in Objective 17, and that is the role of the media, because we know that journalism can be a powerful force for good in promoting a more accurate picture around migration. But we've also seen time and again the harms that can result when unethical media demonize migrants and other minority groups. Hate in the media leads to hate crime on our streets. In extreme cases, it can even fuel mass violence and genocide. So if we're going to counter racism and xenophobia, it's vital that we talk about the role of the media. And one of the important contributions that the Global Compact for Migration has made is that it's one of the first international agreements to recognize the role of advertising money in relation to this problem. This is important because part of the reason that there's been such a proliferation of hateful anti-migrant stories in the media across the world in recent years is that hate sells. Hate has become a part of the media business model. So what is the current state of affairs? Well, the briefing for today's session talks about the virulent discrimination and xenophobia that migrants continue to face, particularly in the context of the pandemic. So there is clearly a lot of work still to do, but significant progress is now being made in tackling a big part of this problem at a systemic level, particularly within civil society and the private sector. Although the Global Compact for Migration is not legally binding, the fact that advertising is referenced in this agreement has already had a significant normative impact within the advertising industry. It has given impetus to initiatives such as the Conscious Advertising Network, which is a new ethical code that commits advertisers to proactively avoid funding media that fuel racism and hatred. So very much in line with Objective 17. And the Conscious Advertising Network now has over 100 members, including major advertisers such as O2 and GSK. And more widely, advertisers are increasingly recognizing their responsibility to ensure that they do not support media that systematically fuel hatred. And this is already having an impact. In the UK, we've seen a significant reduction in anti-migrant newspaper front pages over the last 3 years, as advertisers have become increasingly unwilling to align with that kind of content. Across the world, people are coming together through civil society initiatives such as Sleeping Giants, as well as Stop Funding Hate, and more recently in the US, a new initiative called Check My Ads. And these campaigns are encouraging companies to be more mindful about where advertising money is going. And the potential impact of this is enormous, because globally, around $700 billion is now spent on advertising every year. And as more of this money is moved away from media that fuel hatred, this will reduce the profitability of publishing hateful anti-migrant clickbait. So in terms of priorities, well, every organization that has an advertising budget can play a role here, whether that's member states, UN agencies, NGOs, and of course, private businesses. The more that organizations get behind initiatives like the Conscious Advertising Network, the Journalism Trust Initiative, the Global Disinformation Index, the more that they put checks in place to ensure that their advertising is supporting ethical media rather than hateful clickbait, the more this will help to counter anti-migrant sentiment and make a reality of the vision outlined in Objective 17. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was very interesting. Very good to hear about the work in this area. Last but not least, Martin Sichel will review progress in achieving Objective 23 on international cooperation. Martin, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this panel. And my intervention will, of course, focus on Objective 23, international cooperation and global partnerships, which is the last, but certainly not the least, of the Global Compact for Migration objectives. In the previous 3 dialogues on the different objectives of the Global Compact, my EU colleagues spoke about the implementation of the Compact within the EU and at its external borders. And as a complement to that, in today's session, I will focus mainly on the EU's international cooperation and partnerships with third countries, also to show how the European Union has supported implementation of the GCM. The European Union believes that the global challenges we face in today's world require effective multilateral approaches based on solidarity, on human rights, and on a rules-based international order. My Directorate General at the European Commission about a year ago changed its title to become the Directorate General for International Partnerships, precisely to underline this approach in achieving sustainable development. And our migration policy here in the EU also reflects this approach. Aside from our internal policies, the external dimension is building on strong partnerships with countries of origin, transit, and destination, and working towards a comprehensive and balanced framework for engagement with partners in the spirit of burden and responsibility sharing and the whole of route approach. This approach is not new, but is confirmed in the EU's Pact on Migration and Asylum of 2020, which builds on a major stepping up of work on migration by the European Union in recent years. On the external dimension, the Pact recognizes the need for enhanced international cooperation to manage migration across routes as a whole. And let me illustrate this by mentioning a few concrete examples. The partnerships with African countries has been strengthened through joint initiatives, such as the Joint Valletta Action Plan of 2015, the cooperation within the Khartoum and Rabat processes, and in the context of the cooperation with the African Union on migration. Migration and mobility are also part of the 2020 EU Comprehensive Strategy with Africa and of the renewed EU-ACP relations. The EU-IOM Joint Initiative for Migrant Protection and Reintegration has contributed to saving lives, protecting and assisting tens of thousands of migrants along the central Mediterranean routes. In Asia, the European Union remains committed to supporting the people of Afghanistan, and in October, it announced a support package for the Afghan people and neighboring countries worth €1 billion. In Latin America, The European Union has also been at the forefront of the response to the Venezuelan migration crisis, providing humanitarian and development aid inside and outside Venezuela, including support to Venezuelan migrants and host communities in neighboring countries. Concerning the implementation of the GCM in third countries, EU support also includes a project, the EU-UN Partnership for Migration Capacity Building, through which we support GCM champion countries that are modernizing their migration policies exactly in the spirit of what we have done in the EU. Last but not least, I would like to mention also our response to the COVID pandemic. We know that the pandemic has particularly affected migrants and further deepened inequalities and vulnerabilities. It has also highlighted our reliance on migrants' workforce and their contribution to our societies. The European Union aims to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on migration, including on migrants themselves, as part of its external responses to the pandemic. And in this context, the EU has shown its commitment to international cooperation and multilateral solutions and rallied behind the UN Secretary General's efforts to coordinate any UN-wide response. To conclude, and looking at the future, in the new fund for our development cooperation, at least 10% of our financing instrument will be dedicated to actions related to migration, supporting our sustained cooperation with partners. So I just wanted to give these few examples, and there are many others, to show in practice how we are committed to the principles of the GCM and to assure everyone that you can continue to count on our support to third countries in their efforts to implement the GCM. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. Our panelists have given us much food for thought, and now we would like to hear from the audience. Please raise your electronic hand if you wish to take the floor, and make sure, please, that your interventions respond directly to the presentations by the panelists or to the background note for this roundtable. And kindly limit the duration of your interventions to 1 or 2 minutes. As I have done for the panelists, I will turn off my video when you begin to speak, and when 1.5 minutes have passed, I will turn my video back on. That will be a signal to you that you need to wrap up within half a minute. All right, so let me now start with the speakers list. And the first speaker on our list is Mr. Olvi Aliyev, Chief of the International Cooperation Department of the State Migration Service of the Republic of Azerbaijan. After him, we will hear from Ms. Ariolo from the Philippines and Mr. Eng from Cambodia. All right, so Mr. Aliyev from Azerbaijan, you have the floor.
Hello. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. And thank you for the floor. And I would like to note that it's a really great pleasure for Azerbaijan to also continue contributing to dialogue series through our roundtables, which aims to be taking base for International Migration Review Forum. We are also delighted and honored to successfully organize an event marking 100 days to the International Migration Review Forum just last week in our capacity as GCM champion countries, together with the governments of Luxembourg and Portugal, as well as with the support of the United Nations Network on Migration, which gathered representatives from UNEC region member states. And I would like to also note that Azerbaijan always have strived since the adoption of the GCM to align its activities with the main principles and objectives laid within the GCM. And I would like to also a little bit talk about the activities we have done in terms of the 23rd objective, which is about international cooperation, fostering international cooperation. And in this regard, we have also focused on not just cooperation in the means of establishing relevant councils that maintain our dialogue with the private sector, as well as NGOs and civil society institutions. And also we are looking forward to completing this 300-degree approach laid on GCM as well as establishing a migrant council in the near future in order to more actively engage migrants in the migration policy making in Azerbaijan. And also I would like to touch upon our activities that we have with the international partners, and also I'd like to talk about the one activity that stands out, which in terms of really successful initiative to foster regional cooperation. And I would like to note that we are planning to establish a regional training center on migration that will serve to countries from Eastern Partnership countries, as well as countries of South Caucasus and Central Asia. That's targeted to be a main migration knowledge management hub and also a platform for discussing migration issues throughout the region, which we believe also is in line with the overarching theme of involving all actors in all levels in the migration management practices. And beyond that, I would like to also mention that we have taken relevant measures promptly during the COVID-19, as COVID unexpectedly hit also the migration and mobility throughout the worldwide. And we have also been one of the first countries that responded to the COVID responses, emergencies, with holding an event within the Turkish-speaking countries council that gathered the ministers responsible for migration in order to proper response to the emergencies related with migration sphere during COVID-19. And also I would like to touch upon that we really remain committed to the goals as in our capacity as champion countries, and we are open to any suggestions and discussions that might arise and ready to provide our support and exchange ideas that will further contribute to the principles of the GCM during this period as well as after the IMRF forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aliyev. And we now turn to the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Affairs in the Philippines, Ms. Sarah Ariolo. Ms. Ariolo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening from Manila. For the Philippines, our push to reform the kafala system brought remarkable developments. Kafala is the traditional sponsorship system in the Middle East, which among its unintended consequences sometimes results to slavery. There are now improved policies on labor mobility, bilateral labor agreements, and health and welfare programs benefiting Filipino migrants. This would not have been possible without our collaboration with countries of destination, namely Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. With GCM as our driving force, what was once a vision has now become a movement, the new civil rights movement. The campaign to reform kafala also enabled us to work with states to pursue trafficking cases of our nationals. One particular case involves two overseas Filipino workers who were survivors of trafficking and sexual exploitation committed by fellow Filipinos and foreign nationals in Bahrain. Both Filipino survivors gave their statements in the Philippines, and the suspects were later on apprehended, prosecuted, and convicted in Bahrain. This case highlights the international collaboration of the Philippines and Bahrain. There were also reports of trafficked Filipino women in Syria in 2020. They were all undocumented workers who ran away from their employers and were eventually sheltered at the Philippine Embassy. We brought home 110 trafficked Filipinos in 2021. We assisted them in filing criminal complaints against the traffickers, both in the Philippines and in Syria. Just last week, we received an unprecedented win for the first human trafficking case filed before the Damascus court, making it a landmark judicial victory awarded by the Syrian court in favor of Filipinos. The Philippine government spent almost $120,000 to provide the necessary assistance to address distressed overseas Filipinos. Asian migrants recently find themselves in vulnerable situations due to Asian hate. The U.S. Department of Justice reported that of the 11,129 victims of hate crimes in 2020, almost 62% was due to racial discrimination. As part of the Asian community, we express our great concern for the safety of our fellow Asians. Migrants undeniably have provided the labor force in the healthcare sector during the pandemic, yet they continue to face racism and xenophobia. Thus, we call on all governments and stakeholders to ensure that domestic safeguards are in place to uphold the rights, safety, and dignity of all migrants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ariola. And our next speaker is Her Excellency Mrs. Chu Bun-eng, the Secretary of State, Ministry of the Interior, and Permanent Vice Chairperson of the National Committee for Counter-Trafficking in Persons for the government of Cambodia. Ms. Eng, you have the floor.
Yeah, I thank you, sir. According to the objective 1, Cambodia select this objective as priority and focusing on the data related to the process of migration, the status of migrant in destination country, the legal status of and challenges, the situation and decision of returnee, and conduct the victim identification to provide support, including emergency support, legal support, social support, as well as economic support during stay in country origin. Cambodia considers migrant and migration data as the core of the migration solution, as well as human trafficking and exploitation problem. We try to collect data from returning migrants during COVID-19 pandemic and disaggregated data into gender, age, and other status of migrant. Based on this focus, we can set up the joint program between UN agency, NGO, and government to solve migration issue among returning migrants to elevate their vulnerable situation and to protect them from COVID-19 pandemic since 2020 up to now. Cambodia also has its own policy of victim identification for service provision and to help to set up data system by considering victim as a center for sharing information. This objective also connects to the objective 23, which enhance the sharing data and responsibility to protect the rights, dignity, and benefit of the migrant to be safe during migration cycle. So far, we have various MOU and SOP between sending and receiving country bilaterally and multilaterally, and both sides should strengthen their collaboration as partnership to solve migration issue in a fair manner. On the other hand, regional and international should provide technical assistance to relevant countries to make collaboration done successfully in making migrants safe, orderly, and regularly. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Eng of Cambodia. We will now have Ms. Sarah Salman from ESQA, the Economic and Social Council for Western Asia. And she is speaking on behalf of 4 of the regional commissions, ESCAP, ECLAC, ECA, and ESQA. And following Ms. Salman, we will have Mr. Fabrizio Anzolini from the Regional Migration Coordinator for the IFRC in Middle East and North Africa, and Diop Muntaga from France. So, Ms. Salman, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. My name is Sarah Salman, and as John mentioned, I am speaking on behalf of the 4 UN regional commissions, ECA, ECLAC, ESQA, and ESCAP. All 4 regional commissions with their regional partners organized regional reviews of the GCM implementation while adopting a whole society and a whole of government approach to the reviews. In the ECE region, the regional review was organized by the UN Network on Migration. The results of the reviews across the regions were very insightful, and in many cases they overlapped. Some of these key insights that I shared with you were the following. Member states and stakeholders reiterated their commitment to implementing the GCM and the 2030 agenda, recognizing that achieving the SDGs would further the implementation of the GCM and vice versa. Second, member states emphasized that since most migration is intra-regional and inter-regional in nature, regional cooperation is critical. Thus, bilateral, sub-regional, regional, and cross-regional initiatives should be further strengthened. Finally, the reviews demonstrated that the vital role of the relevant non-governmental stakeholders in advancing the GCM implementation at all levels, given that they are uniquely positioned to assist governments and migrants alike. Also, allow me please to highlight some of the specific recommendations from the regional reviews as they relate to the GCM objectives being discussed today. Regarding GCM Objective 1, member states across the regions noted the difficulty in integrating migration data from various sources, since many government entities collected data using different concepts and methods. However, some countries had made progress in this regard, and regional commissions are following up with member states in assessing data availability and supporting countries in developing standard procedures for data collection. So, regarding Objective 3, several member states emphasized the importance of developing online platforms that can centralize the information and make it accessible to migrants, both in countries of origin and destination, to ensure that they can access timely and reliable information during the different stages of their journey. Regarding Objectives 7 and 17, many member states reported that they had focused their efforts on enhancing bilateral cooperation, revising the legal frameworks governing migrant workers, and fostering the role of diplomatic missions in reducing vulnerabilities in migration. They also highlighted the need to intensify efforts to combat discrimination and reduce vulnerabilities. Finally, regarding Objective 23, the majority of member states pointed out that they need to continue to prioritize international cooperation and global partnership on international migration, and they highlighted their efforts to adopt bilateral and regional agreements as well as international frameworks relevant to ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration. Moving forward, the regional commissions bridge the national and global levels, and they are ideally placed to provide inclusive platforms for fostering regional cooperation and collaboration to accelerate the implementation of the DCM. We will continue to be active members of our respective regional UN networks on migration and work very closely with our regional UN stakeholders and stakeholders partners to support countries in achieving the DCM goals and objectives. Finally, we encourage all member states and stakeholders to take advantage of the intergovernmental forums on the 2030 agenda and report annually on the GCM and the 2030 agenda implementation. We look forward to continuing the discussion and encourage all of you to review the reports of the regional reviews posted on our respective websites. Thank you. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Sarah. I gave you a little extra time because I thought this was so general and it applied. It was reflecting the results from many countries across several regions. So, but now we move back to our speakers list, and there's a slight change in the order of speakers, but next we will still have Mr. Anzolini, and then we will have Ms. Cindy Munro from Canada, and Mr. Muntaga Diop from France. So next is Fabrizio Anzolini from the he's the Regional Migration Coordinator for the IFRC in the Middle East and North Africa. Mr. Anzolini, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I hope, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this dialogue and for giving to the stakeholders the opportunity to share experience and idea. Last year was already a very good opportunity, the regional review and the global review of the ZCM. But we think and we are sure that the IMRF will be, let's say, a better opportunity. As the Red Crescent movement, there is a clear reference in the ZCM of our role as partner in implementing the GCM. We are working a lot on that. We are working with our national societies, mainly through a tool that we call Humanitarian Service Point. We have staff trained on responding to the needs of the migrant, the people on the move, displaced people in the field. Red Crescent movement is always, let's say often at least, the forefront in responding to the needs of migrants. We have more than 245 teams working across with a route-based approach, let's say. And we are working mainly on providing information at all stages of migration, addresses and reducing vulnerabilities on migration. Our approach is purely humanitarian. We really want to, let's say, provide access to the basic services to the migrants. But at the same time, we are very focused on protection. Protection is one of our priority when it comes to migration and displacement. Let's say that we are looking forward for the IMRF, mainly for region. We need to change the perspective. We need the international community, we need the UN agency pushing to changing the perspective of the states. Migration is not anymore a crisis, it's something structural that is, let's say, affecting sooner or later all the states. It's something urgent because we already have a lot of migrants for different reasons, but also climate change is coming. It will become one of the topics in the upcoming years. But we need to advocate not only for the needs of the migrants, but also to make the state think that migration can be an opportunity. So for that reason, we are looking forward to the IMRF in May.
Thank you.
A more coordinated approach between all the actors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this intervention, Mr. Anzolini. And next we turn to Cindy Munro, the Minister Counsellor for Migration and Refugee Affairs of Canada. Ms. Munro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the UN Network on Migration for convening this meeting. Canada strongly believes in the need for international cooperation to further the objectives and the overarching principles of the GCM. In our experience, international assistance programming that uses a feminist, intersectional, and human rights-based approach is a key way to foster this cooperation. Guided by our feminist international assistance policy, Canada provides funding to partners in support of programming to address the root causes of migration, to combat migrant smuggling and human trafficking, to deter irregular migration, and to meet the needs of migrants. For example, in Costa Rica, Canada is funding local media outlets to train independent journalists to produce investigative reporting that covers the stories of migrants and migration in Central America, while applying a gender-sensitive and human rights-based perspective. The project combats disinformation and promotes the publication of accurate information oriented towards migrants and the organizations that serve them. Since 2020, Canada has also been co-leading the It Takes a Community multi-stakeholder communications campaign through the Global Forum on Migration and Development. Through the sharing of stories on social media about inclusive communities and how migrants and migration can enrich our lives, the campaign aims to promote balanced narratives about migration. States, local authorities, civil society organizations, and the private sector can each make valuable contributions to a balanced public narrative by leveraging their interactions with diverse audiences in society. We hope to raise the profile of balanced migration narratives around the world, and we hope you will join these efforts aimed at improving social cohesion and countering xenophobia and racism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Munro from Canada. And we now give the floor to Mr. Muntaga Diop from the Youth Protection Judiciary in the Ministry of Justice of France. And after Mr. Diop, we will turn to Mr. Rojo from Mexico and Alankrita Dayal of the UNMGCY. So, Mr. Diop, you have the floor.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation, and thank you for giving me the floor. I am Muntaga Diop. I work indeed for the French Justice Ministry. I am mostly here. I mean, I have two hats. One, which is the Justice Ministry hat, and we support minors who are often struggling with the justice system. We're trying to come up with education-based approaches to solving some problems that they may be facing. And unfortunately, we seem to have lost a connection with Mr. Diop. At least we cannot hear him anymore. In addition to what we do, we try to also carry out other activities, and I wanted to quickly share with you a few recommendations. I am a civil servant, as I said, for the Justice Ministry, but I also work locally in Morocco. We have established there an ambitious program to support migrants, and we have received, and I want to mention this, excellent support from the Kingdom of Morocco, including the King himself. I think Morocco has done an exceptionally valid and relevant work in dealing with the necessary support that migrants that are minors of age need to receive. I know time is limited today, and I want to give the floor to other people, but I hope that in May, if I can make it to New York for the forum, hopefully I'll have the chance to maybe talk again and share with you other information about what we do, because I think education is central, and this is the focus that we have. Education of migrants, particularly minors of age, is essential. This is how we can not only help them to become integrated into society, but also this is how we can support them, help them reduce their vulnerability level. And I think if we can do that with the support of the countries of origin, then we can be successful. We've seen that in Morocco when the local authorities of the country of origin and the country of destination work together, then with the support of consular services, of course, we can certainly be very effective. And we believe that through education, we can integrate young people better into society. And again, as I said, the consular departments of sub-Saharan African countries, for example, in our case in France, are important partners.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Diop.
The end of my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to Mr. Eduardo Rojo Oropeza, the Director for International Affairs in the Migration Policy Unit of the Ministry of the Interior of Mexico. Mr. Rojo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilmot. Gracias por la oportunidad. Si bien en México tenemos varios retos.
In Mexico, we have several challenges, but we have a lot of things to share, especially about these objectives. Number 1, number 3, number 7, also number 17, and number 23. I'll be brief. I would like to share best practices in Mexico in terms of the GCM. In Mexico, we generate information, also publications. We do annuaries with migrant flows and remittances. We have several online publications about human mobility. This concept is increasing. We also talk about human mobility, including this forced displacement, internal forced displacement. We are widening our perspective. We go beyond these 4 traditional dimensions in the migration movement. We are very active in the task force about migration. As you know, via SOPEMI and other tools, we create lots of information. We also elaborate statistics about Mexican nationals abroad, also for elections. These are some of the practices for Objective 1 that we've been working in Mexico. For Objective 3, and in order to share with you and also for all those interested, not only in migration flow, we have specific portals online about requirements to come to Mexico, information about how to stay and live in Mexico. We have an assistance center for Mexican nationals. And we also have a registry for translators and interpreters of indigenous languages. This is a good practice because it allows us to share with all those populations that don't speak Spanish. I would like to mention the broadcasting of the study that we do every year about GCM. I will share it in the chat. It's 2 volumes. The first one is an executive analysis of what happens every year, and the second volume is a general view of all good practices. About Objective 7, we created several commissions to have a better coordination.
Excuse me, Mr. Rojo, could you please finish your
yes,
overtime?
I'm finishing.
Already? Okay, thank you.
In international cooperation, we've been very active. We have a regional conference about migration, and there will be a meeting by the end of February in order to bring a common position at the regional level. I have much more to share, but I will leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for respecting the time as much as possible. We now turn to Alan Krita Dayal from the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. After this speaker, we will have Mr. Sebastian Fonseca from Ecuador and Mr. Diego Iturralde from South Africa. So Alan Krita Dayal, you have the floor.
Thank you, John, for the floor, and thank you to the co-hosts and the UN Network on Migration for the Space. My name is Alan Krita Dayal, the North America focal point for the Migration, Youth, and Children platform at the United Nations MGCY, where we work on addressing a range of social issues affecting young people all around the globe through policy design and implementation, youth advocacy, capacity building, and open dialogue in identifying emerging issues and creating an evidence base for best practices at the grassroots, regional, national, and global levels. I'm also the executive director at Program Your Future, where I oversee the research and development of our artificially intelligent technologies and programs which support underrepresented youth in overcoming language and cultural barriers, better accessing social welfare services, and preparing for the labor market through educational and financial interventions. Today, I will share a few sustainable solutions that have successfully helped our cities in North America improve service access and delivery for disadvantaged migrant populations, provide information and training to guide new arrivals, and strengthen local civic and political participation. In our technology-driven world, when we're thinking about inclusivity within our cities and designing policies and programs that provide accurate and timely information at all stages of migration, it is very important to consider creative uses of smartphones to engage immigrant populations. For example, in several of our North American cities, including New York and Chicago, one-stop apps provide a means for residents to access city services through a single portal, thereby reducing barriers for residents with limited English proficiency and for those who lack institutional knowledge about which agency to contact for city services. Civic apps are also helping migrants access information on immigrants' rights, training them for citizenship tests, and helping them volunteer, register to vote, participate in civic forums, and give feedback on civic planning processes. Additionally, personalized learning tools and educational games, such as those that we have at Program Your Future, are ensuring adequate living conditions, decent work, and social protection for migrants by increasing their access to quality education and tailored instruction for specific occupations. Our apps for new arrivals are particularly advantageous over other technologies because of the on-the-go learning migrants can access during otherwise unused times, for instance, while they're traveling to work, in any language and on any type of device with the option to run offline too, without the added cost of a Wi-Fi network. We have also integrated translation tools that help facilitate everyday interactions, including in urgent situations for accessing healthcare and disaster relief, which is a priority for our objectives. With nearly 85% of the world's population owning smartphones, it's very critical to be prioritizing the design and development of such easy-to-use apps. So thank you so much for allowing me to share these experiences that are working great in North America, and I'd be happy to collaborate and share some more afterwards too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dayal. And next, we will have, as I said, Mr. Sebastian Fonseca from Ecuador, and then Mr. Iturralde from South Africa, and that will conclude, I believe, our time. So please, Mr. Fonseca from Ecuador, you have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias por darnos la palabra.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Warm greetings from Ecuador to all of the member states and the UN bodies, other orgs and civil society representatives that are here. We are a champion country and a signatory to the Global Compact, and we're very excited to be taking part in this to the run-up to the IMRF. We've always been a destination country, but also a country where lots of migrants emigrate from. We have more than 500,000 Venezuelans here that are here to stay, and we can see that we given 21,500 status or migrants from this crisis in our country at the moment. And we're a country that really does welcome the most migrants in the region. And so we can see that there's been endless studies carried out on these issues. As regards the objective number 3, our Ministry of External Affairs actually provides consular and migratory services for our own citizens and also for foreign citizens. As regards objective number 7, the Ecuadorian state is committed to reducing vulnerability within migration with and through these methods to protect these Venezuelan migrants that I mentioned before are heavily present in Ecuador. And we are always convinced that we can still reach our foreign migrants in our country in spite of the limitations placed on us. And by COVID-19, we've actually been able to administer first and second doses to all of these categories of foreign migrants. And we do this through the mayor's mechanism and other campaigns. And we can see that through this, we can change narratives on migration, and we can do the same with Foro Rojo, which is our initiative. We've been able to get xenophobia out of schools when it comes to the migrant community.
Thank you.
This has been done through the Quito process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fonseca. And lastly, we turn our attention now, we give the floor to Mr. Diego Iturralde, Chief Director of Demography and Population Statistics of Statistics South Africa. Diego, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. I'm going to try to be as brief as I possibly can. I would like to speak on Objective 1, and I'd like to support the comment made by Dr. Crayley about a all-of-government approach that is led by the National Statistics Officers when it comes to migration data. More than this just being a concept, I would like to propose that a migration forum be established across government that deals specifically with data, statistics, and research into migration. A similar initiative has been implemented in South Africa with a lot of success so far. I think what's really important here is that when we talk about the final question that we have posed about using data to inform policy making and to inform the process of migration governance, we need to occupy this space with evidence that we create. Otherwise, this space will be occupied for us by other parties. The notion of a migration survey, this is a complicated matter because of the need for funding and of methodological issues. But I would like to propose that in the interim, that something like migration modules in household surveys be introduced. This gives us a wide array of indicators that can be produced on an annual basis and that can inform the governance space. With that, I'd like to thank the chairperson for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Diego, for that very concise intervention. And I think we're going to take time for one more speaker. So that will be Ms. Mariana Popescu from the NGO Committee on Migration. So Ms. Popescu, please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for creating this forum for discussing all these very important issues. As a representative of the UN NGO Committee on Migration, I wanted to stress the fact that it's so good to hear about progress being done, because in our committee, we really took an approach that is solution-focused. Yes, we still have a lot to do, but there was a lot being done. So how can we push some of these good practices and good solutions forward? And I'm thinking there is one such solution that is very well described by objective number 5, actually, and that is regularization, or creating paths for regular status, right? And this is so important. Not only does it go across most of the objectives in the Global Compact, but it does go across the 2 Global Compacts. And it is the key to actually providing not only a safe space, but a way to integration and a way for migrants to contribute to the society. If we are really looking at this, and I'm talking here mostly about Objective 7, but as I said, it will go across all objectives. How else can we address vulnerabilities if not by providing access to regular status that then provides access to all the other rights that migrants have as human rights? So thinking about this, there are some really good practices. We are looking at COVID and COVID time and what, for example, Canada or France did during this time to regularize status. In France alone, over 12,000 essential workers were given citizenship during this time. And it's not only the best and the creme a la creme, it's people that are working on the front line. So their value was recognized. How can we push this forth, right? We are looking at Colombia and their multiple level partnership between the government, UN institutions, international development agencies such as the World Bank. They are focusing on creating status for Venezuelan migrants and addressing that population. So my question and my challenge for all of us is, how do we take this further? You know, right now we have 3 venues that we can use to have this kind of discussions and put regularization at the center as one of the good objectives to really lower vulnerability, increase integration and participation in society. One is the IMRF. The other one is the regional review forums, both of which are only happening every 4 years. But we do have the Global Forum that occurs every year. How can we bring this forth? So together, because as it was mentioned here by many of you, together we can push. We can only do this together. We need states' commitment. We need NGOs' commitment. And I know that the NGO Committee on Migration is working and puts this as a priority that is now integrated in like that, for example, in the 12 key priorities.
Yes.
How can we bring this forth? How can we work together to push for, regularization? Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, for these insightful remarks. And I am told that we, in fact, can continue for an extra 15 minutes. So that means that we should have time to fit in the last 4 speakers on the list. They are Ms. Kathleen Caron from Justice in Motion and Ms. Estrella Lajom from the IDAC and Mr. Hugo Palma from PT and Mr. Jack Amick from UN Core. So first, Ms. Kathleen Caron, the founder and executive director of Justice in Motion. Ms. Caron, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you for giving me the time on the floor. My name is Kathleen Caron. I'm the founder and executive of Justice in Motion, and I'm here to talk about Objective 7, addressing vulnerabilities, and Objective 23, international cooperation, around the concept of portable justice, the right and ability of migrants to access justice across borders, and how key this is for global migration today. It's important to address labor rights violations for workers who are exploited in one country but travel to another. We need mechanisms of international cooperation to be able to address those rights violations. It also applies in the human rights context or the civil rights context as well, so that when people have their rights violated by a government, for example, in the family separation crisis at the US-Mexico border, and people are deported, that they have the ability to exercise justice after they've been removed to that country. We at Justice in Motion have a civil society response by setting up a defender network and working internationally, cooperating internationally across borders so that human rights lawyers are working together with each other, because these migrants are facing issues, as noted in Objective 23, in during transit from the origin before they even go, setting up human trafficking potentially in transit in the country of origin. So I encourage the express inclusion of portable justice into the IMRF and expressly into the Objective 7 and to 23 in the interpretation of it. So that is my intervention. Thank you so much for the time from the floor.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for the mispronunciation of your name. We will now go to the next speaker, who is, Miss Estrella Lahome from the International Data Alliance for Children on the Move. I'm not sure if that's correct. I've conflicting information. Okay, great. Please go ahead, Estrella.
Thank you, John. Excellencies, dear colleagues. Indeed, I speak on behalf of the International Data Alliance for Children on the Move, or IDAC for short, under the joint leadership of UNICEF, Eurostat, IOM, OECD, and UNHCR, and with its cross-sectoral membership. The IDAC is leveraging the power of data and statistics to promote the protection, empowerment, and realization of the development potentials of children on the move. In November 2021, the IDAC Data Insight publication highlighted that 7 years after the adoption of the 2030 Agenda to leave no one behind, the challenge to disaggregate population data according to migratory status remains far from completed. 3 out of 10 countries and territories hosting migrants do not have age disaggregated migrant stock data. This means that millions of children continue to be hidden behind total migrant stocks and their unique needs and vulnerabilities not properly addressed. As Professor Crayley said, achieving the first objective of the GCM and thereby ensuring that no migrant child is left behind will require whole of government and whole of society approach to data collection, analysis, sharing, and use. No single country, agency, or stakeholder alone can do it. Hence, the IDAC is engaging all concerned stakeholders, countries, international organizations, civil society, academics, and think tanks, working at the intersection of human mobility, development, children, and data issues to find solutions by pooling technical knowledge and experiences together. Currently, through our working groups, the IDAC is conducting a mapping exercise of existing, planned, or adopted child-specific or child-relevant indicators. We are also mapping the available and emerging good practices on data capacity strengthening with the end in view of producing a manual on the topic. These exercises are open to all interested member states and non-state partners. Please contact us at idac@unicef.org. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much for this intervention. And I apologize to the remaining speakers. I'm afraid we will need to end the speakers list now and go back to the panelists. I'm so sorry for the speakers who were not able to intervene. So we will go back to the panelists to have 1 to 2 minutes, no more than 2 minutes, please, no more than 2 minutes. And we will begin with Ellen.
Thank you very much. This has been truly inspirational to me to hear all of the good works that have been shared among the participants in this meeting. We have challenges before us. Ms. Popescu has urged us forward and given us really the flag to carry forward in progress in implementation of the GCM. And Ms. Ang from Cambodia, I think from my point of view, in terms of the foundation of data for evidence-based policy has made the case for us. First, in the case of human trafficking, but to identify data as the core to the solution. I so appreciate that, but of course, leadership is required as well. In addition to leadership, we need resources. We need resources to support international exchange and cooperation, to benefit our statistical leaders and our political leaders as well, to act on behalf of the GCM. Our representative from Azerbaijan has illustrated the importance of training. I so appreciate that. I know the community of population scientists want to invest in training of future migration scholars and statisticians, and we stand with you on that. All of this will support evidence-based policy and programs on behalf of migrants, and placing migrants at the center of these processes is critical, as well, as so many of you have described. I thank you. You have inspired me.
Thank you, Ellen. And we now give the floor to Minuma. Madame, vous avez la parole.
Madame Memouna. D'accord, donc merci à tout le monde.
Thank you, everybody. It's been really really important to hear all the panelists. We've exchanged ideas and expertise and good practices. We've seen that many efforts have been deployed by NGOs, entities, in order to enhance and improve migrant situation all over the world. There are plenty of challenges still to tackle, however, but I can see that a lot of work has been performed all over the world. Therefore, I wish good luck to everybody. What we do need today is that all our efforts converge towards the same objective to solve the issues we are facing, and we are at your disposal if you have any question regarding our efforts and our work that we do in the CNDH in Morocco. Thank you, and see you soon.
Yes, thank you, Madame Maimouma Essayed. I hope I said it correctly this time. And next, we turn our attention to give the floor to Mr. Diego Morales.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Honestly, it's been a very special opportunity to share all these experiences. We noted the different advances, the different limit situations around the world. I have 2 comments from all the participations. First, as Mariana was saying, it's very important to regulate migration, because with this objective number 7 and all the ideas that it contains, we can comment all of the objectives, and regularization can be the key to improve the legal situation of all migrants. And my second comment is about taking advantage of some of the suggestions by the High Commissioner in terms of the protection of migrants, as for instance, the guidelines and the principles for migrants at the border, and also guidelines that I already mentioned about policies or programs for regularization. I think these tools will help us to cooperate in this process. We are available, and again, thank you for giving us the floor, and thank you for organizing these exchange spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morales. And next, we give the floor to Mr. Richard Wilson. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for involving me in this discussion today. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear the rich range of work that's going on around the world and different aspects of the issues covered by the Global Compact for Migration. I guess one reflection for me is really that when I think about the different things that are happening around the world to support the human rights of migrants in various ways, it seems to me that maybe Objective 17 is a kind of enabling objective, because tackling racism and xenophobia towards migrants and promoting a more humane public discourse for migrants helps to in turn lead to more humane practices and greater respect for people's human rights. So I think I'll just conclude by, again, commending the initiatives that civil society has started, where it's made a good start, but there's a lot more still to do. I'd recommend that everyone who's interested take a look at the Conscious Advertising Network, which, as far as I'm aware, is one of the first sort of practical efforts to implement the principle around ethical advertising that's listed in the Global Compact for Migration. But there's lots more potential there, and the more organisations get involved and feed in and help to develop that, the more of a collective impact we can have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. And now we give the floor to Martin Sechelt. Martin, you have the floor.
Martin had to leave.
Martin had to leave. Okay, in that case, then let me change gears. And we now have concluded with this discussion. All the panelists have made their closing remarks. I want to thank all the panelists for their excellent contributions, and also the audience for your very thoughtful interventions. This has been a very rich and interesting discussion. And now I'm very happy to hand the floor over to Azra Karim Raiput from the Secretariat of the UN Network on Migration for some closing remarks. Azra.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much to colleagues in UNDESA and colleagues in OHHR for the organization of this fourth webinar in our IMRF dialogue series. As you say, John, this has been, again, a very, very fruitful discussion. Just like during the other discussions, we've had between 300 and 450 participants call in, listen in, engage in our discussions as we prepare for the first IMRF and especially for the roundtables of the IMRF. Colleagues within the network and, of course, the Network Secretariat have taken careful notes of your contributions. We will be reviewing those, as well as all the discussions that took place on the UN Network Hub discussion spaces. As we will be reviewing those, of course, as we are finalizing the background notes for the IMRF roundtable. So we will hope to reflect as much as possible what was discussed here today and before. We've heard a lot about the importance of international cooperation today, but also during our previous webinars, we've also heard a lot about the importance of regular pathways, and very much hope that all of this will be reflected when you receive the final background notes to the roundtables around the end of March later this year. We have also seen, and that's also another element that will be taken into account as we finalize the background notes, we've also seen really how you have started contributing to the Hub's repository of practices, which is something we are very, very pleased to see. We have now close to 90 practices already, and all of those are being sent for peer review. So the work, the activity, the engagement around the UN Network Hub is absolutely picking up, and we are encouraging all of you to continue to do so and continue to engage as we move and as we prepare further for the IMRF. Now, today was the last webinar in preparation of the IMRF 4 roundtables. The next session or the next series of webinar under our IMRF dialogue series will be focusing on much more on the challenges and the emerging on the gaps and the emerging challenges. We will have a first webinar of that kind take place on the 23rd of February, and the focus will be on the impact of climate change on migrants. So you can find that information on our website. There will be a concept note as well, and we'll make sure to share all the information as well closer to the date. In between today and the 23rd of February, we will be moving or slightly turning our attention to New York, because on the 16th of February, there will be the official launch of the Secretary General report that will feed into the IMRF. And that will also, of course, be one of the key activities of Migration Week next week. We hope to see many of you engage with us during the webinars and activities that will take place as part of that Migration Week. And as always, we stand ready for any comments or inputs that you would have. So thanks again for all your contributions to this first part of our IMRF webinar series, and we look forward to further engaging. Thank you. I don't know where, John, I have to hand over back to you, or?
I think that concludes it. Azra, thank you very much to everyone, and I wish everyone a good day and a pleasant evening, as the case may be. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.